Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about what vibe coding is and how we should be using AI in modern and professional web development. So this is something I kind of wanted to talk about. I've been kind of touching on it a little bit in my recent vibe coding videos, and going to bring that forward a little bit, consolidate my thoughts more quickly in response to a few comments on my last video. Now, obviously, I'm not going to always do a video to respond to particularly negative comments all the time, not at all. But this one does contribute to the discussion, even if some parts, sad feel a little bit obnoxious. Don't use those emojis. But there are things that are important to have a little look at and discuss, whether you're in WordPress and using AI, whether you are having a go at vibe coding at all, obviously with the use of AI. I mean, this channel started out as client tutorials for Elementor sites, and I've not really known where it's going for a long time, but right now it seems right that it's a space where I'm putting into the discussion, putting out my raw thoughts, and just trying to process all of the changes that are happening in this industry at the moment. There's lots going on, and a lot of people are trying to figure out where they stand, what skill set they want to focus on, how they want to propose or promote that to clients, or produce work for clients. And I've been shaken up with it a lot in the past few months. But yeah, I've put out some vibe coded stuff. My last video was this one, variables versus design tokens, where I shared with you guys how, despite trying to really be purposeful in my AI vibe coding build, Claude tried to go off the rails a little bit, and I had to pull him back, pull on the leash like a naughty little dog. And in my efforts to do that, I leaned on my recent education. I leaned on stuff that I had recently learned. I leaned on patterns that I had learned in order to do the best thing, in order to do professional web development within an AI assisted project, which is a term I want to refer to, come back to later. And got fanboy Phil. I'm calling you fanboy Phil. All right, you're a Geary fanboy Phil. Coming to the front and being like, "Oh, you're ripping off Geary. You're ripping off ACSS," and I wanted to respond to that, to be respectful to Geary and ACSS in a video. I did so first off in a comment, and what I got back is the bit where I'm like, "Yeah, that stuff needs discussion. I think it does." So, all right, let's pop along to the can I open this one up? Oh, don't hey want guys, to listen to me listening to me. But okay, so this is where there's a fair point. So in the video, what happened, for those of you who haven't watched it, but I do suggest that you do watch it if you're vibe coding and you're wanting to get that more professional edge on your builds, is that I had instructed Claude that I want to be building with best web dev principles. The best sort of web dev principles that are promoted, not created, but promoted by Kevin Geary in a lot of his recent teachings. Sounds like he's guru on the, doing a Sermon on the Mount. But best web dev principles as are promoted by Kevin Geary and as are evident in products created by Geary and his crew, ACSS Etch. Okay, so it's been a lot of my recent learning as I've stepped back into what I would call proper front end web development. But a couple of things had happened. That's the wrong screenshot. I'm sorry. My color palette, despite these attempts to properly use variables and design tokens, had become a bit incorrect. Okay, so I had given Claude clear instructions to observe these principles, and what had flown under my radar was some more specific color variables. And if you want to understand why this isn't positive, please watch this other video. Where is it? please watch this other video, okay? Oh, geez, I'm just screwing this all up. There I am. All right, watch this video. That will be helpful to you. But this is not what we want to see, such specificity, color navy, color gray in the sort of the root variables. We don't want to see that. So I'd noticed that had flown under the radar and it wasn't what I wanted. Now, what I needed to do then at that point was put into my variables and then into my design tokens more of a raw color palette, more of something like a brand guide that you would get from a designer for a project. So you get the brand guide from the designer or from the business. This is our brand, these are our colors, and you need to be able to take those colors as a web developer and put those as raw variables into your project, the one source of truth. And then what I did learn more from ACSS, although I had been doing this in my own practice anyway, because in a page builder, Elementor or Breakdance at least, I'd have a primary color used for buttons. I would then make a darker version of that to use for button hover, and you globalize that. But what I'd done during this moment of crisis in my project, how fucking dare I, was use this naming convention. Okay, so what I've got are the colors, accents, colors, base, neutral, and then I'd use light and ultralight, dark and ultra dark. All right, okay, that is straight out of ACSS. Okay, fair enough. But so that's when I've got someone like Sad Phil, but yeah, Fanboy Phil, saying, Isn't this just you finding a way to rip off Kevin's hard work and allowing AI to learn a complete system that Kevin and team came up with that works? All right. Seems like you are just figuring out a way to use AI to rip off other people's hard work. AI in a nutshell, to be honest. That feels like theft, really. Okay. All right. Now that's a pretty strong statement. I'd like to respond to it. Again, as I did respond to it in this comment, I mentioned in that video that, because that video was about me showing the solution that I found, in that video, I most definitely leaned on my most recent learning, my most recent sort of, what was embedded into me as a proper principle that I should follow in my projects. I leaned onto that, and of course the naming convention came with it. But these are best web dev principles. What I've learned from Kevin's stuff, Page Building 101, which I would promote to anybody who's in my comment section saying something like, how do I get started in this? I still think you need to go and do Page Building 101. Open up VS Code and learn to put a page together. All right. It's the most important fundamentals if you want to guide AI in the future properly. But yeah, I've learned all of these best web dev principles, including setting primary, secondary, whatever, a color palette, and then the practice of creating shades around it that you use consistently in your projects. So in my moment of crisis, yes, I definitely pulled from the ACSS naming conventions here. All right, but this is the thing I'd like you to understand, Phil, and everyone else. All right, the whole thing of taking colors and creating a palette and then shades around that isn't unique to ACSS. ACSS have done it brilliantly, and I like their implementation. But that isn't unique to ACSS. I double checked this just to get a few more broader ones with ChatGPT, but we've got Tailwind, all right, and they create all of these different sort of shades with different colors, okay, as you should. Material design, I mean, I've never used these, but we've got blues 1 to 12. These are actually quite similar to the Tailwind, so I don't know which came first or second or whatever, but it's a way to name things progressively through a scale. Okay, I like here that it comments. ACSS does it a bit more sort of semantically, which I think is helpful in the interface, but obviously transparencies tends to be a number. I've noticed, and that makes a lot more sense because it's just a reference that's in your head. But let's go along to Tailwind documentation. Okay, scales. We've got colors that you use in your project. You've got a bunch of different scales. You can sort out your custom colors, and you might have something a bit more like light, dark, and things like that. But regardless of what you're calling them, regardless of how many stops you're having, and regardless of what you're calling them and how many stops there are, you need to have those colors and those shades set in stone, set as a variable, set as design tokens, as one source of truth throughout your project. That isn't ACSS specific. That is just what ACSS did really fucking well. And so, again, if I've leaned onto a naming convention, fine, I can step away from that. All right. If it's like, oh, that's the point where you're copying, where like inspiration becomes imitation or whatever. Okay, fine, cool. I'll respond to that, and now it's called primary light 2, primary light 1, primary dark 1, primary dark 2. Now I've got my naming convention. It's the same principle as is used by ACSS and other CSS frameworks and other best web principle minded frameworks that you are creating. I've now got a framework that I apply to my AI driven or assisted projects. Does that make sense? Is that cool? Is that calm you down? Because now maybe we can talk about doing some proper web development without snidey remarks, and without everything getting a little bit sort of into the weeds, I think. Because I want to make it really, really clear. I do want to keep discussions open. I think there is a lot that's changing. I think there's a lot that's being shaken for people in the industry. But well, we've got to figure out what's actually a fair objection and what is, I don't know, people getting a bit sensitive about stuff that doesn't really bloody matter or might not be credible. I would never want Geary or the ACSS team to feel like they've been ripped off in any sense. And so I just need to draw the line here and go, okay, to their credit, in my moment of crisis, I leaned on what I've learned in terms of naming conventions from that system. But you can't sort of like, and I'm not saying the ACSS team have done that. This is sad Phil. You can't unlearn something. You can't unlearn a best way to do something and go, well, no, that belongs to somebody else, so I can never ever use that sort of similar situation in my own projects. You've learned something. So maybe not a naming convention, but when you've learned the best way to do something, people can't own that. And as I've hopefully demonstrated, the practice of bringing your colors into a variables list that you can refer to with design tokens and creating a range of shades that are then the consistent one source of truth values that you refer to, that's not unique to ACSS. It's not even unique to CSS frameworks that you'll find out there. It's a web development principle. And where it goes from whether or not you can use, I suppose, particular naming methods. That's irrelevant to here. I will use my own. Nobody's allowed to use this, by the way. All right, so don't use light to dark and then color stops. That's a Chris good naming convention. It's a good naming convention. All right, but let's get off that point. Hopefully I've satisfied that a little bit and been respectful to the discussion and also to Geary and ACSS. All right, because I do want to do that. But we have to come to this bit, which is where I wanted to go in my little discussion anyway, which is about this whole thing of, what what did you say, Phil? What did you say? AI seems to me to be a double-edged sword in that it facilitates people who, for whatever reason, lack of ability or couldn't be asked, do things they couldn't. All right. That's kind of where I really wanted to go in my discussion anyway. So, and I have touched on it a few points in some of my other videos. What Fanboy Phil is saying there is that doing something like vibe coding or AI is helping people to do something that they otherwise aren't able to do, and that there's something wrong with that. So, we have to talk about vibe coding. What I've noticed is that around in the community that are very much responding to Geary and Etch and ACSS and things like that, clearly there's a lot of talk about vibe coding. I mean, I had my first go at vibe coding last week because Mark Szymanski responded to Julian's video, and that was the final push that I needed to be like, right, I've got to get on board with the vibe coding thing because I'm seeing a lot of AI website stuff going on here. I want to sort of mention that I've already been aware of the double-edged sword, because my opinion with it was that all over LinkedIn, I'm just seeing lots of people talk about AI. Don't get a WordPress site from someone. They just want to tie you into maintenance. What you need to get is a AI coded site. I made this so easily for my clients. It was fast. It was easy. It was hosted for free. It doesn't need maintenance. It's best for clients. WordPress is cooked. And I've not really taken that very well because I work in WordPress. I've been working very hard over the last few months to work better in WordPress. So using bricks and etch with, in preference. And so I've not really taken to that very well, because I think that's people wanting to take shortcuts, offer a quick fix solution to people, and then market that above or against what I'm producing in WordPress. So I've not really been appreciating the whole, I can just vibe code an app in 5 minutes with a voice prompt and hey. That seems threatening to me, and it also seems like I don't believe in the goodness of that work, to be honest. So yeah, I totally get the double-edged sword thing. But, Mark Szymanski's reaction to Julian, I was like, okay, right, I've got to try this out. And it was just an experiment to create sort of landing page or something like that. Something I could offer clients for, a subpar introduction to their digital presence, something along those lines. I ended up making my entire personal website, because the process was interesting, the process was exciting, it was new, and it was not easy, but I just got into the exploration of it, the learning of it. But as I said in my previous videos, I noticed that it was doing things its way and not in line with what I'd recently learned since October, November with best web development principles. I realized it was using Tailwind utility classes all over the shop. And although I could make a change by saying, Claude Code, go in there, change this class to that class on all elements, and I could perform that major surgery with just a voice prompt, what I've learned recently is that isn't how I should be setting up a web development project in the first place. Okay, so it's going against that which I've learned is best in a web dev project. So yeah, AI is a double-edged sword, and that first project taught me you can't just let AI off the leash. Okay, you can't just let it go and do what you've asked in its own way. This is where I'm coming onto the whole thing of, I don't know that I like the idea that I'm a vibe coder. I'm not, actually. I'm going to say it now. I'm not. I do not do vibe coding. I do not speak of prompt into the whatever device I'm using and feel happy and satisfied with the app or the website that gets spat back out to me. That's vibe coding. You might do some revised little, you might do some further revisions and everything. But if you haven't done a deep check of the code, if you haven't made sure that it's using what you want it to use and building it in the way that you, as the architect, as the visionary, in the way that you want that to be structured, then that's just vibe coding. It's just spitting shit out of your mouth and getting shit back, in my opinion. What I'm interested in doing and mastering is AI assisted web development, AI assisted coding, AI assisted design, AI assisted copywriting, AI assisted, not vibe coded shit. All right, so not VCS. And that's definitely where these last few videos have gone. I've been like, all right, you can't let AI off the leash after you've given it a command. All right, it's got to be an obedient animal, an obedient beast that's, brought to heel, and you've got to give that tug on the leash. That is exactly what that last video, variables versus design tokens, was all about. All right, keeping AI on the leash, being the master of the tool, being the master of that beast. So, yeah, Phil, I agree. It's a double-edged sword, and it facilitates people who, for whatever reason, lack of ability or couldn't be asked, do things they couldn't. They're letting you do things that professionals did, not necessarily as well as the professional would. That's the coders who are losing work. Then you'll start stomping all over all the different disciplines that come into web design, overall losing other people's jobs. It's a snowball effect, sort of like the famous poem, first they came for the Jews, but I wasn't Jewish, so I didn't help. Then they came for la la la. This is where you go a bit wrong, Phil. I'm not specifically aiming at you per se, but there are a group of people who are smart enough to do just enough damage, and I think it's at your level. Sounds like you're aiming at me, Phil, so allow me to retort. This entire sentence that you've said about how, you're saying AI is a system that allows people to do something or offer something that they're not professionally trained for, that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do. That's WordPress, okay? Unless you, from your position, Phil, and anyone else that's in agreement here, or anyone else who's shitting on AI, unless you can, from scratch, create a CMS, actually work with PHP and all of those systems, integrate that with the server, unless you can do all of that and then the front-end development on top without any plugins, just your own system, then if you're a WordPress user, you are using yesterday's equivalent of that sort of tool. All right. There were professionals who would template out an entire PHP system in a CMS. You don't do that now because you use WordPress as a shortcut, as a productized open source quick fix system that allows you to do what otherwise you wouldn't be able to do. I'm not shitting on that because that's what I've done. That's why I came to CMSs from hand-coded, hard-coded website development almost 10 years ago now. Okay, so I'm not shitting on it, but you can't have a go at AI-assisted web development from this standpoint if you use WordPress, if you use any plugins that do anything that you can't code yourself. You can't. It doesn't work, I'm afraid to say. You're putting coders out of work. You're putting people, if you use e-commerce plugins, WooCommerce, and you don't know how to connect to Stripe or, a suite of products in Stripe and set up the APIs for that. Maybe you do, Phil. Maybe you're the genius. All of us hope that we want, that we can be. We know everything from front-end development all the way back to integrating, into APIs and making that work with the server. I don't imagine that you do from what you say here. You say that you're at a lighter sort of level, learning front-end development from Geary, which is great. But if you can't do that, then you are relying on yesterday's equivalent of AI. And I think that's a legitimate thing to consider. I think that's a legitimate thing to really own in our own professional limitations, because from where I sit, there's always going to be a part of us that we're strong in one area, and then we that we find the limitation of our own specialism, and whether we satisfy that in a team. So we've got a team member that can take care of SEO, or a team member that can code up the more difficult PHP elements. We're going to step outside of our own comfort zone and hand that over to something. Now, WordPress has enabled us to take the entire CMS, the entire PHP wrestling template part of that, and hand that over to a productized, free application that puts a ton of coders out of work. Now they're not needed for like 40% of the internet. That skill set of PHP is already taken care of in its own little system. You know, how could you do that? You know, you've put them all out of work because you used WordPress. I need a drink. So yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. But, you know, this next sentence here, Phil, and anyone else who's wrestling with this in their own sort of like, where do I stand with everything? Again, you need to kind of think about where you're sitting with AI and where that should sit in the same principles with WordPress. But, you know, however, with the help of AI, you don't really need the skill set. You just shop around, see what's the best, and ask AI to do it for you. Again, that is literally WordPress in a sentence. You know, if you haven't got the skill set to create the CMS or PHP templates in the beginning, with the help of WordPress, you don't really need the skill set. You just shop around, plug in repository, see what's the best, and ask that plugin and WordPress to do it for you. All right, lots of people at that level, including myself. Yeah, cool. Okay, so let's just make that a clear thing. All right, you can't shit on the use of AI as a quick fix tool if you're a WordPress user. And that includes even if you're using Etch, by the way. The thing about Etch, which is absolutely fantastic, is that it gets your fingers back onto the keyboard. It gets you back into having full control in the front end web development aspect. In the elements of front end web development, it puts your fingers back on the keyboard, where previously within WordPress there really wasn't a solution to that. And yeah, so I mean, I guess I want to speak on that actually. Is that he's saying sorry, I'm trying to get better at that. That's what Etch has really brought to the table since, you know, October, November. Then again, I think that's an incredible thing to have done, because when I came into the WordPress world in, I think about 2018, I think it was, I built my first site with WordPress. Elementor was all the rage. But I don't know. Phil again here is like, I watched a few of your videos and the first one was you saying Etch wasn't for you. It's like, no, it wasn't for me. But go and watch the video. I said it's good, it's important that we're coming back to the code. WordPress hasn't had that ecosystem. What I didn't like was I couldn't try it without a 15-site commitment. What I didn't like was that a lot of things at the time were promised, but you know, it wasn't there as something I could use for full client sites at that point for that introductory, for that price range. I'm not going to apologize for that, because I still stand by that. Some of my recent videos were me saying that although I think it's best to use Etch, I think it offers, you know, clients the best overall product if the time has been put into the development properly. It's hard to get the ecosystem here in the UK, at least anyway. It's hard to get that over to clients because they all want the visual drag and drop builder. They all want the promises that are made on the colorful adverts from Wix and Squarespace. And it's like, can you do the equivalent in WordPress? Yes, can. It's called Breakdance. So yeah, you know, I stand by that. It's not such an easy sell to clients or to web agencies or designers that you're working with. Why? Because it pulls them out of the comfort zone. And Etch is great because it's really sorting out, it's sort of like you know, everything goes to blocks, and it provides a better editing experience for clients and marketing teams. It provides them those opportunities. But you know, it's still not as easy a sell, because there's an increase in web development time, or to create new sections, it has to go back to web dev. And that's just not what clients or agencies want to do, unfortunately. But this wasn't meant to be so defensive against what's been said here, but it's, you know, it's just sort of relevant commentary, really. Let's go back to AI. And how we need to be using that properly. So, in my opinion, There's WordPress. It's doing a lot for you that you don't know how to do. It's meaning that you can step into the arena without particular levels of a professional skill set. And WordPress enables you to offer e-commerce. It enables you to offer social login. I don't know if anyone of you have, actually set up OAuth links and things like that. It's a pain. I haven't done it for years. But it helps you step into that arena and offer a client something that you otherwise couldn't offer. AI does the same thing, but here's where I have the problem. Vibe coding is the equivalent of using Elementor. All right, vibe coding, just, hey, I can speak into AI and I can mention a prompt and then I've got an app. That is Elementor development. That is using a template that's mostly put together, that is tweaking that up with Elementor or styling and things like that in the wrong way. Everything that I have learned since I was shitting on Etch is more best web dev principles, and I don't want that to apply to my AI assisted projects. So that's where I'm drawing the line. I don't want to be vibe coder. I want to be someone who does AI assisted web development. Some of that is coding, some of that is copywriting, some of that is design. AI will assist me in all of those things, but it will be my bitch. It will be held back on that leash, and it won't dictate how things are built. It's not going to dictate the decisions and the tool set and whether it's Tailwind or whether it's whatever. I'm going to tell it from my learning, from the things that I've learned as best practice, what it is going to do and how it's going to do it. And then I'm actually going to double check the fucking code and make sure it's done it as I wanted it to be done. That isn't vibe coding, as I'm hearing about vibe coding on the scene. That's AI assisted coding, and it has pros and it has cons. Some of the pros on that is that I can start working in a system that I've not previously worked in. So these two projects are Next.js, built on React, obviously. I've not done that before. All right. I've not done that before. I've got to be clear on that. I've looked into it and gone, okay, that's 6 months of learning that I don't think I've got in my schedule at the moment. But I've not done that before, so I can't do it. Now with AI vibe coding and helping me hook up with Sanity and work all that together, now I can do it. All right, just in the same way, Phil and other people, that you can now work with PHP templating, even if that is not your strongest skill set. But I want to show you something. All right, some people have said, why the hell are you not just speaking directly to Claude Code? Why are you in Claude AI? And then Claude, and then copying and pasting or whatever into Claude Code. I'll tell you why, and I've told you why. Because I'm learning. All right, I've got Claude AI set up as that coach next to me, the one that I ask 1,000 questions to, and he doesn't get tired of it. If I ask him to explain something 4 times, he'll explain it to me in 4 different ways, and that means that I'm learning. So I've not just been patching all of this together. All right. I've started to learn about how this is put together, the file structure, the fact that we have different folders for the different pages, and most of the time, and then it has a page.tsx in there. All right. I've learned enough that I'm creating my own page blocks and components, and I'm looking at this structure and it's becoming familiar to me. All right. How I can jump into Sanity and I can create schema types and where I'd put the fields, all right? In the same way that I'm familiar with WordPress and I know to go to ACF, and actually more familiar because I'm actually in the code. I'm in the code and I'm understanding the code, all right? This is all starting to make sense to me because I'm not just vibe coding. I'm not even just doing AI-assisted web development. I'm doing AI-assisted learning, all right? I'm making Claude be my coach. I'm making Claude teach me. And sometimes I'm stopping the project and going, you just said that and I don't understand that principle. Explain that to me. And then often I output that onto a PDF. So I've got that as a learning document later on. Okay. So that is the power of AI. I'm stepping into a system that I don't yet know. I'm becoming increasingly familiar with it and enjoying that learning experience, to the point where I've even asked Claude, directed Claude, I should say, because he's my bitch. I've even directed Claude to ease off on the automations. All right, so he'll actually just tell me like which file to go in and what I need to go and edit, and then I go and do that. All right, I go and do that manually because that's how I'm becoming more familiar with the environment, with the space, and things like that. All right, so that's what I think is the strength of all of this. That's the double-edged sword for AI for sure. One side of it is that you can speak prompts, vibe code an app, make a YouTube video about it, say, look what I did, and you have no idea what's actually in the code or anything. I did that on my first vibe coding video when I'm like, oh, look at this, I've just remade my website. But it turns out I was using Tailwind and utility first classes, utility classes as a first method of styling, and I don't want that. So now I'm kind of trying to rein that in. So anyway, I'm going off on one really, but so yeah, AI is a double-edged sword, but I'm trying to be on that side where it's more of an assistant to me, and I'm informing it with everything that I know as a best web developer that I can be. Now, I do want to actually come back to a comment there, actually. All right, because yeah, I've not always just been an Elementor WordPress person. All right, I taught myself web development in early 2000s. All right, so 2004, 5, something like that. For like over a decade, the sites that I was putting together were hand coded. I got familiar with HTML, CSS, the forms that it had then at that point, at least, it was very different. JavaScript, Stack Overflow, why the hell isn't this working? Trying 1,000 things, getting it to work. Web development, hand coding being quite hacky at the time. I'm not saying I was a coding genius that could do everything at all. Not at all. Really, really not at all. I would say front-end web coding is generally where I sat. I could put a site together with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript confidently, and get the result that I was looking for at the time. My first step into a CMS was because, and this is what we've been talking about really, was because there was a project I needed to do for someone very close to me, and they needed they needed a CMS, and that's what everyone was using at the time. The one that I went to, because I did try WordPress and I thought it was shockingly bad, was Joomla. All right, so I went into Joomla, and then that is how I started to offer sites. So built sites for restaurants, bars, for other people in the music scene where I was at the time. Obviously for myself, and the one that he was doing was for a deals website. And that's where I got into Joomla. So the use of PHP CMS and bringing that in with templating and then styling that up. And very quickly, I ended up sort of making my own templates, making extensions for that. I don't know how quickly I would take to it now, to be honest, because I'm rusty as hell. Yeah, rusty as hell. But I do believe code first is the best thing. I do believe that knowing your tools, knowing your craft, knowing how to do something from scratch and then using tools on top to make that easier and faster. I do think that is the way that it should be. And, I kind of miss how competent I was back then with Joomla, making templates and extensions to fulfill the client's needs. So like, for example, a frame shop one needed an entire sort of frame preview thing. So people would put in the picture of choose the frame, choose the mount, choose the size, and made it all. It was just within a Joomla extension, using JavaScript to sort of like take their picture that they would upload. I was very proud of it at the time. I'm still proud now to think that I put that together from scratch. Now I know that I could wrestle with that, and again, it was Stack Overflow and all that kind of stuff to get over the bits that I didn't know how to do. I could wrestle with that, and I think the whole thing took me probably about 20 hours to build. It was a really cool effect. But now, yeah, genuinely, I could get that done in probably an hour with AI, which is astounding, isn't it? But I would have a choice in that, whether I go into the code and have a look at everything and ensure that it's as I want it to be, that ensure that I'm familiar with the code and and what it spat out. Is it robust? Is it resilient? Is it going to be something that we can use in a year? Or I could just accept it as it is. That's vibe coding. I don't want to be a vibe coder. I want to know what is under the hood. I want to know how it was put together. Again, I want AI to be the dog on the leash, my bitch. Yeah. Okay. So, and I think that's I just think that that's where things need to change up. I'm seeing a lot more of videos in the community that I'm seeing around here. And a lot of people are maybe not so harsh on the line of, hey, you can just, well, there's a they're talking about AI just, doing it for you. And I don't want to do the heavy lifting. I don't want to work. Like Mark Szymanski, it reminded me of Mark Szymanski there. I think Mark is great. I think he's he's grown a long way. I think he's had much the same sort of evolution from like being like Elementor into Bricks and Etch as I have, and then he's gone into the AI sort of thing. What I get from Mark is that he doesn't want to wrestle with the code. He doesn't want to understand the code. He wants AI to go and do it for him and to architect and be the visionary. I respect that. I understand that. I personally, I want to be able to go into the code and know exactly how it was built. I want to dictate how it's built. I want to put everything that I've learned into practice by AI being a tool that I'm using. And that's where I feel like there's the danger between vibe coding and people producing a lot of stuff which is very similar to Elementor or Breakdance. Like, is it resilient? Can it scale well? Is it robust? I think the vibe coding is the equivalent of the early use of page builders, and then you've got the side of page builders where like Bricks or Etch, where it's put together more professionally by people who are caring about scalability and maintaining it properly. One source of truth. You can go into a Bricks website and it's put together like an Elementor website, all styled on the elements and a complete mess to work on. Or you can go into a Bricks website and somebody's taken the time to use BEM methodology, style on the selectors, and that's the same tool. It's different attitudes and different ways of using it. AI is just the same. It's going to help you step into a space that you might not have all of the skills set in, but hey, that's WordPress and plugins. And then you can use AI to just vibe code something with your voice and be like, hey, look what I made. Or you can use AI to assist you in producing something with the best web dev principles that you know and that you can put into practice and that you can guide it with. And I want to be the latter. I've been into this like a week and a half. I want to be that person who is just assisted by AI. That's kind of what I wanted to say, really. So whether in that I have stolen a naming convention from ACSS, Geary, if you're watching this because someone's put it onto you, because Phil has gone to you and said, there's a mad, mean man who's stolen your stuff. Heartfelt apologies. Never meant to do anything like that. It was a good learning practice. It rooted in my mind. It did what it should do in terms of implanting principles, and I applied that in a moment of crisis. Out of respect, totally cool. I've pulled away from it. I don't have the screenshot anymore. Fine. I have a different naming convention now, which I will continue to use. But everything else, the idea of taking a color palette and creating one source of truth in variables and design tokens. Sorry to say it, Phil. You should be aware. Everyone's using that as a system, and it's quite right that they do. But it's very nice to see that you are, standing up for someone if you feel that they are being violated in any way. Just want to make sure everyone knows, I'm not taking things personally. I'm not ever out for a fight. I love the discussion of it. So happy to have a back and forth with people. I think we should. I think we should throw all of these different things around and see where we sit. I've got a lot to say on it. I mean, like I will just quickly say, last year, well, maybe more than that, all of that WordPress mess that went on, a lot of people were genuinely like, I'm relying on WordPress. I'm relying on these tools. I'm relying on these plugins. I don't even know now if they're going to leave WordPress altogether. Should I be using WordPress? Because WordPress in itself is just, on the rocks. All these stupid politics that went on, just the use of ACF, or, do I have to now migrate all of my ACF over to, what the hell was it called in the end? Stolen fields, it should be. We're relying on systems. Our promises to clients are relying on systems. So people are right when they're saying, are you relying on AI and it's going to disappear or it's going to change? Hell yeah, absolutely. I remember a ChatGPT update that completely changed how it would help you framework blogs and writing. And I saw people really struggling in marketing teams because suddenly the tool that they were relying on wasn't performing as they thought. We're all relying on tools unless we know how to hand code from scratch the entire project. Whether that's AI assisted or whether that's WordPress. You're relying on other systems, other people, the output of other people's professionalism. So we've got to figure out where we sit with that. My personal thing is that my first go into vibe coding, because I was led into it by AI, was to create React Next website, which is so overkill. All right, I'm not doing that for my clients. I've learned beyond what AI recommended. I'm going to Jamstack setup with Astro, and I'm going to use much the same systems that I've set up now. The use of components, the use of one source of truth, the way that I'm setting up the selectors and designing. I'm using lots of the same principles, but I'm not going to be doing next websites for people that just want a 10-page brochure. So I've learned beyond AI's guidance there. But what was I saying? But yeah, that whole mess, it showed us that we rely on systems outside of ourselves, and we make promises to clients when based on that reliance. That's not a safe place to be. So I think it's best that we are always learning, always trying to coach ourselves and make sure that as much of it is in our own sphere of influence and our own power as possible. So we've got to learn what we can, we've got to learn that. We've got to put the time into that. These past few months have been where I've engaged again with the feeling of being a front-end developer. Like back in my day, 15, 20 years ago, when I felt that I was a front-end developer. There wasn't room in WordPress to be a front-end web developer, and all of my skills set got rusty as hell. And it was all quick fix Elementor, then onto Breakdance, okay, and then Etch came along, which I was at first resistant to for the pricing more than anything, okay. But I feel like front-end web development is back, whether you're in WordPress or whether you're going into an AI-assisted, AI setup system through vibe coding like I'm doing with Jamstack. Front-end web development is back if you want it to be back. Or you can be in WordPress and use a page builder like the new Divi or Elementor. You can do that instead of doing front-end web development with Bricks or Etch. You can do the same with vibe coding and AI. You can build out a new website for somebody, doing what AI says to do, using Tailwind, styling it however it sort of guides you to with that 1-pixel hover border. Or you can be a front-end web developer, make AI your bitch, and have it assist you in building the rest of the system. It's up to you. But one of them requires a bit of grind. One of them requires purposeful learning. And probably slower results, because you're not going to want to put something out there until, I could have put adverts out in my local area this week being like, hey, do you want a quick, fast AI assisted website, blah, 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 because I'm comfortable with vibe coding and working in VS Code, but it's not the product I want to put out. I want to be sure, first of all, that I am styling it as I want it to, that I have it componentized, that that's the system that I'm going to start promoting to clients. Until then, I'm just in my little room at 5 a.m. doing the learning, get into the grind until I have a product assisted by AI that I'm happy to give out to clients. That's my personal line. And yeah, I'm gonna, maybe I will get a bit defensive if someone's saying that I'm just resting on my laurels and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Don't know. Don't shit on AI if you use WordPress. That's hypocritical, really. But a point that I've made in a couple of videos as I've been wrestling with this is that Etch. When I first looked at Etch, I said, why is it on WordPress? Because it's an amazing visual display interface that I'm like, I can get back to. It's a really great modular system. I can create an entire, I can take care of the front end web development there and tie it into other systems. Does that need to be on WordPress? Does it need to be tied into the CMS that is WordPress? Because as I'm working in VS Code and making an effort to actually manually, to some degree, create my components and then make sure that BEM is on them, and then style within that and actually type out the styling that I want tied to my variables and my design tokens. As I do that, I'm kind of like, I'm missing Etch. I'm missing that interface. I'm working in VS Code and I'm like, well, couldn't Etch be on the top of this? And with that, couldn't ACSS be there? And then I'd be allowed to use color, ultra, color dark, color ultra dark again. We're all moving forward in this industry and trying to find ourselves. Why is Etch tied to WordPress? That's the, maybe that's a question that Geary actually wants to sort of consider. Don't know. Anyway, okay. I didn't want to just war in the comments. I think you end up writing essays and stuff like that. This is a long video. It'll probably have the average view of 2 minutes, 17 seconds. But I think it's respectful to come back face to face in a discussion, actually talk it out. And yeah, I hope that's answered some things for some people. And Geary, honestly, if you felt I ripped you off, I do apologize. You taught some great things. It's really been amazing to get my fingers back on the keyboard, understand it, be open to newer web dev principles. CSS that I've nesting and stuff just wasn't there when I was first doing it. Yeah, it's been really good. Page building 101. It's the first go-to like tell anybody to go and do, because it's the foundations that we need to be learning on, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, never any offense meant to anyone, even fanboy Phil. Thank you for your engagement. Yeah, see you in the next video.